Who would have known that it's still Christmas?
I know. I know.
We're really stretching this one out.
This is really an exercise in time travel, is what it is.
So. I think so.
There's a part of our lives that have gone forward since Christmas. You have your life and I have my life, and we're out there living those lives. But there's also this weird part of our lives that have stayed right here.
Exactly.
In like the December 22nd, 23rd, etc. And we've just kind of been stuck here. I think we're doing a pretty good job of getting along, which is nice. So,
which is funny because like real Caitlin in December 23rd, I think I was in Las Vegas. That's also a place I don't want to be for 5 months. We're keeping it together, but we've got to get out of here. Yeah. It's got to be Valentine's Day or Easter at some point.
It has to be. Absolutely. And I can't think of a bigger nightmare than being in Vegas for 5 months. Oh my God.
I know. Some people love it. That's what I learned. I learned that some people love it, and that's just fine.
That's just fine. That's wonderful.
I don't have to be those people. No, we did find one of the best brunch places I've ever been to outside of the Strip. It was so good. They had these pastries shaped like dinosaurs. It was cool. So there are some good things in Las Vegas.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Can I find it really quickly? Can I find it? Can I name them? Can I just slow everything down?
Could you get a side of Jurassic pork?
You know, as a vegetarian, I can't answer that question.
Okay, good point.
Oh, no. Okay, we'll find it later. Do you ever time travel through your notes app? Are you a notes app person?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just fun looking at lists from like 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I had this one note. I think maybe I sent it to you and Jessica, but it was these absolutely incoherent story ideas. I was just like, I don't believe that this was me who wrote this.
Yeah. I write little ideas down for jokes or sketches or whatever. And one time I was going through it and there was just, usually there's a whole bunch on a note, right? But this one was just one idea, which means that I was darn sure about it however many years ago. And what it said is, the elbow is the knee of the arm.
I feel like that's something that like children often say.
Yep.
Oh, I found it. Can I read you these lines?
Yes.
Okay. One just says square apples. The other one just says Formula X. Underneath that, there's the question, are bodies projections? Last one. Don't think of doing good for your mother. Think of the whole.
Sure. Sure.
And if anybody can understand what was happening in my brain, like, they get a prize. Back to Christmas. Here we are.
Here we are.
Not a Poirot in sight for a while, actually. This is just part 2.
Yeah, this is just December 23rd. And I will just share with our lovely listeners that I was pretty sure that this was a very, 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 very long part of the book. It turns out December 24th is very long. Yeah. So it was a little bit of a sigh of relief when I was like, oh, this is a relatively simple one.
Yeah, this script is 3 pages, unlike Caitlin's like 8 to 20 page notes. Let's just see how long we can stretch this out, though. Let's see how long we can make this episode with very little actual concrete information.
Absolutely.
No, there's too much good stuff in here, though. There's some biblical references. There's some urgency around doorbells. There's some siblings who don't know their siblings who are attracted to each other for a hot minute. There's a lot happening.
There's also, for me at least, the very exciting use of the word peal as being a doorbell ringing.
That is exciting.
Which I had never thought about. And now when our doorbell rings, I annoy my partner by saying, oh, the peal of the door. And it's just terrible.
She's like, stop. Anyways, it's Christmas. Let's go to that doorbell ring. Okay. We're at Gorston Hall. The first chapter, we had a lot of people planning to go to Gorston Hall, but they hadn't arrived yet. And we're going to now get everyone gathering for the holidays. And this is actually, I really loved the beginning of this chapter because the chapter starts with a doorbell ring, but that's off the page. That's already happened. Instead, we get the second doorbell ring. And I kind of love that. It just starts in the middle of this urgency and chaos. Tressilian, and he's our butler, right? Because we have the nurse and we have the butler. Tressilian rushes to answer the aggressive doorbell. So right away, the tone, because before I think we've just left, I think we said it before, the cartoonish evil moment. We realized that Mr. Lee is just as awful as everybody had said. And we've had the sense of like the house as being like kind of an extension of him, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we just were there, and now the house is like, it's almost, to me, it feels like it's waking up, or things are getting really aggressive. People are coming, and the doorbell is getting rung in an ill-mannered and impatient way. Basically, Tressilian is very upset by the ungentlemanly way that the doorbell was rung.
Yes, but to your point, there are some recurring tropes in this book, and one of them is joining in the middle of something, and the other is when Tressilian opens the door, it takes him a second to realize who's there.
Yeah.
And this is like something super important for the book. And if you've read it, you know there are a lot of bodily and facial descriptions in this book, and it's intentional.
Yeah, you're not just like, God, why is Agatha Christie so obsessed with people's faces? It's not that. Trust her.
Right.
So we get this sense that whoever is on the other side of the door this time, and that is, yeah, I'd say that you're right. That is a motif. Who is on the other side of the door? Oh, it's kind of scary, actually. And so we know that the person on the other side of the door this time is not a gentleman. And so who could that be? It's obviously Harry. So Tressilian is surprised it's Harry, but then Harry is surprised that Tressilian is surprised.
Right.
So they're both, he's like, wait, aren't you expecting me? And Tressilian's like, actually, no. Harry asks for his brother. So he's asking for Alfred. And Tressilian's like, he's probably looking forward to seeing you. And Harry's like, well, I'm not looking forward to seeing him. So already a lot of functional family dynamics. He also mentions the prodigal son. I think because we'd had that in the last chapter, talking about like preparing the fatted calf. And so he echoes that, Harry, by entering the house and saying, lead on, old son. The fatted calf awaits me. Lead me right to it. He understands his role here. He knows he's the prodigal son. He is waiting for kind of, I'd say, his like reward for coming back home, or his parade, I guess. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would. I also think that even though we've seen little bits of all the characters in part one, this is the first time any of the kids seem like they have that same devil may care kind of FU attitude that Simeon does. Harry has it, and he seems very different than his brothers.
There's this thing of like, who's the most like their father? Instead of seeing a fatted calf when he arrives, he instead encounters a figure with black hair and a creamy exotic pallor. Who is it? It's Pilar. She's shown up. My favorite thing, though, is his first reaction is like, are you my dad's seventh wife? And she's like, no, da, da, da. She explains. So I guess this is the moment that we're talking about where he's like, ooh, who is this exotic woman? Oh, wait, it's my half-sister. Or no, just, da, da, da. It's his niece, right?
Yeah,
his niece. Uh-oh. So, but Harry clarifies that Mr. Lee only had one wife, but there's this huge implication that there's been lots of other women. So keep that in mind. Is that too much of a hint? I don't know. So we've been introduced to all the characters separately, and now they're all coming together and they're all assessing each other. And I think that's the interesting thing, is we're starting to get the like in-person dynamics between all of these people. So Lydia enters, and remember, Lydia is the one who has to like live with Alfred in the house. She has her strange therapy garden with penguins. So yeah, Lydia comes in and Harry's like, I love how she walks with authority. Meanwhile, Lydia is like, Harry is both untrustworthy but attractive. There's this sense that Lydia is kind of drawn to someone with a little bit more bravado than I'd say Alfred, or that's something she's missing. Harry is Harry, but he also has this like outlandish personality and maybe more of like a backbone.
Yeah.
There's this flirtation that kind of develops between Harry and Lydia, which is, I guess, more appropriate than him being into his niece. He like disparages the house a couple times, but then he's like, but Lydia, look at what you've done to the place. You've made it so much classier. We just get some interesting vibes between the two of them. But then he suggests that they all go see the father. He says with a quote, sudden impish grin that reminded her with a start of the old man upstairs. So that's, again, there's this hint that he's of his father, maybe more than the other sons.
There's also this part where Alfred or Lydia are talking, and I think just before Harry says, let's go see the old man or whatever, Agatha Christie describes him running his finger along the line of his jaw. And then when we cut to Simeon is stroking his jaw.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, that's so good. Maybe this isn't the right analogy, but it's almost like that game of memory or Guess Who, where you're like, so-and-so is similar to so-and-so. And you're like looking for those facial feature similarities, I guess, or like mannerisms.
Yep.
So now we're in part 2. So each day is broken up into different parts, but each day is also called part 1, 2, 3. So it's kind of weird that we're in part 2, December 23rd, part 2.
Right.
If that makes sense. But that's where we are. So for some reason, Pilar and Simeon are hanging out. But I feel like he brings her up here to like assess her a little bit. And I think he's figuring out if he can scare her.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like with the way he starts out, just totally over the top talking is an attempt to intimidate and or assess her.
Yeah, he's figuring out if he can manipulate her. He's figuring out like her mettle, kind of. It's this big test, I'd say. And I guess then he's like putting it on. Oh, I've been so wicked. She could be terrified, but it's Pilar. Her whole vibe is unaffected. So she's really unimpressed. And she replies, all men are wicked. The nuns say so. That is why one has to pray for them. So she's kind of showing, I can play your game. I can be as cynical. You're not going to scare me. That's what I got from this interaction. It's very uncomfortable because he's bragging to his granddaughter about all the sins of his past. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I've done all the good old sins, kind of insinuating, again, he's had many children with many women. He compares himself to, quote, an Arab chief who had a bodyguard of 40 sons, all roughly the same age. And so he's like, I bet I could produce a bodyguard if I needed to, if he tried to find all of the sons that he's produced in the world, which is a really big hint. He's like, are you shocked by me? And she's like, no. She's like, men always desire women. That's why wives are so often unhappy and why they go to church to pray. So she's just like, you're not surprising me. You're playing into my worldview. And then he kind of like talks about his wife and laments about her, always wailing and weeping. It rouses the devil in a man. She'd no guts. So he's kind of like always trying to find the person who, if he bullies, they'll stand up to him. Yeah. Instead of being upset by it.
And also in a really creepy and evil way, he takes credit for destroying his wife's life.
I like that he then calls Alfred a nincompoop. Mm-hmm. And he says nothing is so boring as devotion, which I think is really interesting too. How he assesses people, how he decides if they're worthy. If they just kind of show the devotion that the kids probably think their father wants, they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. And then rather shockingly, he has some nice things to say about Lydia.
Yeah.
Yeah. He kind of thinks that Lydia's the best of she and Alfred.
Totally. But Pilar says a very interesting foreshadowing moment, a Spanish proverb kind of about his past behavior. She says, take what you like and pay for it, God says, or says God. Then she asks Simeon, and I love this. She's like, have you paid for it? So it's a threat. He gets angry. He then calls her the devil's brat, but I can almost see him saying that in a way that's like offended, but also loves it. There's some complexity to that reaction. He does say that her mother was, quote, the best of the bunch. And he accuses Pilar of pretending to enjoy talking and sitting with him, but really all she wants is his money.
Just a second before that, they both agree out of the blue that Harry is the best of them, of the kids.
Yeah.
He says that.
I skipped over that.
Pilar's like, yeah, he is. Yeah, definitely.
So again, everybody's thoughts about each other kind of becoming clearer. This is also great because it is, at this point in the story, we don't know who's going to die. We know it's an Agatha Christie story, and I love that she can use that. She can kind of use the reputation of her stories to help facilitate tension that maybe there wouldn't be if this were just like Joe Schmo writing it. You'd be like, what's going on? Like, what's going to happen?
Joe Schmo's a talented writer, Caitlin.
Yeah, he's of his own. It's an unfair comparison. But yeah, Pilar, though, she kind of plays the game. She's like, you're right, I don't love you, but I do like you. And she says, and this is where it's like, oh, come on, but you're still doing it. She's like, he's more real than everyone else in the house. And he has interesting things to say. And if she were a man, she'd like to be like that too. I don't know. I feel like she's still manipulating him.
You do get the feeling that she's playing him, that she's on the counter offensive, where she's bobbing and weaving, but she's scoring points because maybe he's more surprised. But then we get to the uncut diamonds part, and she does seem genuinely shocked.
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating that Agatha Christie is showing us just how wealthy Simeon is, because he has all these uncut diamonds, and the reason they're uncut is because they give him like a tactile feeling of when he was strong.
I think if he were like physically scary too, it would be too much.
Yes. I think this scene gets too intimidatingly creepy if he was like a guy in his 40s. Right.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Just like, whoa, no, thank you. Also, quickly, when I was on tour one year down in the South, I think it was somewhere in South Carolina.
And by on tour, you mean when you were in a band?
Yes, when I was in a band and we used to tour. We were in South Carolina, I believe, and we stopped and we had a quick little meal at a greasy spoon that was called the Devil's Brat. That was not a good show that night, just so you know. Yes. So,
oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, sitting on that one for like 7 minutes.
I'm glad you got to express yourself that way.
Thank you.
Speaking of expressing yourself, the one thing I want to mention kind of before he brings out the diamonds, he shares with her that he once waited 15 years to get revenge on a man who crossed him. And he said, "Please don't forget." And I think all of that is very important, actually.
Yes.
Not, I don't forget, please don't forget. She's kind of tossing out this little breadcrumb of someone may have a grudge. And Pilar's like, was that in South Africa? And he's like, yes, that was in South Africa. That brings up the diamonds. And that's when Pilar is actually legitimately, like you said, kind of stunned. She can't one up that. Like, he wins the fight, I think.
And it is also important that he asks her to put them back.
Yeah, there's this little bit of like trust.
Right. And I think the other thing that's so great about this is that there is no chance in HE double hockey sticks that Simeon
I'm so glad you censored yourself.
It's important these days. Is that there's no way he's showing anyone else the diamonds. There's no way he's bringing Alfred up there. There's no way he's bringing, like, none of that's happening. Not even Harry, I would imagine. And I think the reason is he's kind of feeling like maybe they fought to a draw up there. And he doesn't respect his kids enough to ever feel that way.
Okay. So we get to part 2, December 23rd, part 3. And I'll stop that, but I still love it.
It's great.
Now we get a different tone here because we're with Hilda and David. They've arrived, and this is like the womp womp section, I'd say.
Yeah.
Or I guess we're moving to a different emotional tone. We've just had a sparring match between these two cynical, wicked people, you could say. we get Hilda and David. David, the little sensitivo boy. So he is in the house. We know that this house is a place of deep trauma and pain for him. He sees his mother's chair and he's just kind of like wandering around. I wrote in a daze of trauma. But if we look at kind of what Christie's doing, what a lovely motive for killing your father. And he actually is like, David's talking to Hilda and he's like, I remember when my mother used to read to me the book Jack the Giant Killer. And so, you know, we could see that in David's mind, he's Jack. His father is the giant.
Yeah.
Like another motive, check, check, check. He finds the piano where his mother used to play. Hilda is trying to find all these excuses to leave because she's like, this is too much. Like either you're too emotional or I'm too annoyed or just like stop. He's wallowing, right?
Yeah.
And Hilda's like, let's interrupt this line of thought and emotion.
Yeah.
But no, he's like, I'm going to go play. And he plays an overly sweet Mendelssohn song. And I haven't listened to Mendelssohn in a while, but I'm assuming it's more like romantic.
Yeah, this very sad, wistful stuff.
It's funny because she's asking for Mozart. And didn't we get the sense that she was like a Germanic peasant or something earlier?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We know that Hilda is probably, people have kind of said she's the most clever. She's like, no, play this clever genius. And he's like, no, I'd rather play Mendelssohn.
Oh. There's also a great thing, too, and I think that this is something to remember with what you had said in the pre-read. This book is delightfully unsubtle.
Yeah.
And there is this scene basically ends with David like having a moment of reflection and then collapsing onto the piano keys. Like, boom.
Yeah.
It's completely over the top and wonderful for being that way.
And that makes me wonder, like, sometimes there are things that are so over the top and I have zero tolerance for them. Mm-hmm. And then there are other things that are so over the top and they're done so well. And someone please tell us how you can like tread that line or like what the difference is. But in this one, it is so fun. It's like, it doesn't need to be nuanced. It doesn't need to be subtle.
No. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And I'm very open and fluid with anyone's gender, sexuality. I believe that things can change, things can stay the same, however you want to do it. But I will tell you right now that in this book, if Hilda and Lydia spent 5 minutes together alone in the kitchen, they would leave as a couple and just be like, we don't need these stupid men.
That's our rewrite. That's our modern retelling. I love that for them.
Yeah, me too.
But we have to switch scenes. We're at part 4 now.
Wait, part 4 of what?
Part 2, December 23rd, part 4. We get another doorbell ring. And guess what? It is also aggressive. And this is a very interesting moment that we have to pay attention to. I think when you read this, even the first time, you're like, something weird is here. I think this is important. There's a silhouette. We have to imagine that maybe the door is like stained glass or it's like fogged glass or something like that. There's a silhouette of a man in a slouch hat. I don't know what a slouch hat looks like. We'll Google it for everyone and post it on our social media. But Tressilian, he opens the door. Poor man. He opens the door and he's like, what the heck? This has happened to me before. He's like, surely this has happened before, surely. So he's very confused. He's taken aback. So we have to pay attention to that. We're like, when did this happen before? Who was the other person? Is it the same person?
I think she actually writes the line, it was as if everything was happening twice.
Yeah, so there's no confusion here. But it still is mysterious. And that's always going to be at the back of our minds as we get Poirot and as we start kind of like peeling away at what the possibilities can be. We have to kind of factor that in, that like nothing will make sense unless we account for the double door incident.
Right.
So there's a man there. He's like, hey, is Simeon Lee home? Tressilian, and this is interesting too, because he's having deja vu, but the voice of the man also triggers a memory. Mm-hmm. And he says it was an intonation, or this is kind of what's narrated. It was an intonation of a voice he remembered from the old days when Mr. Lee was first in England. So we get 2 pieces of important information here. He's like, hey, can I see Mr. Lee? Tressilian's like, sorry, dude, he's an invalid. He can't see you. So the mysterious man gives him an envelope and asks him to give it to Mr. Lee. Dun, dun, dun. Who could this be?
Who could it be?
We're not surprised. Last section, part 2, December 23rd, part 5. Simeon Lee gets the letter. He's like, oh my gosh, it's Mr. Farr. It's our boy Steven from the first chapter, from the train. Mostly everyone's here, right? We just don't have George yet. George hasn't arrived.
I believe George has not arrived, correct?
Yeah. So we learn that he is the son of Ebenezer Farr. And I have to wonder here, it's not an accident, right? That this is a Christmas story and we have someone named Ebenezer.
Absolutely.
Okay. She's just having fun. She's like, how about I just throw in all this stuff? So this was his old partner in Kimberley, which I'm assuming is a place in South Africa. I have a note to self that says, look up. Didn't look it up, but we can assume. So Stephen, and he like enters the room. We can see he's nervous, but he does add a little bit more like sweat. We can tell that he has this like swagger he's putting on, and his accent gets more pronounced, which is interesting. So it's like, is he actually who he says he is? Is he from South Africa? What's happening here?
We have more deception too.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing too, is that Stephen seems to be coming home to England, I think, in the train.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he's not from South Africa. So I don't know. There's some stuff happening. What deception were you talking about?
I was talking about the deception between he and Pilar.
Oh, yeah. That they pretend they don't know each other.
They pretend
right?
they don't know each other because he is brought up to the room and with Simeon, and Pilar is there, no doubt just sitting there stunned like, that many diamonds? And
she's like, what the what?
And then for a second they see each other and Stephen thinks to himself how quickly Pilar makes it seem like they don't know each other.
We kind of end the chapter with Pilar. She's sitting by the fire and she has a hand screen, kind of like a fan. And she's kind of using it. I don't know. I imagine her like fanning her face, but almost like using it in like a coquettish way to like manipulate all the men in the room. And it says her eyes were demure and downcast, which is like, we know that's not the Pilar we just saw. So like, what's her deal? How is she pivoting now to be in the room with both Simeon and Stephen, which is a new dynamic?
I took it to mean that, okay, so we know that it wasn't too egregious, but even after Harry found out that Pilar is his niece, he didn't exactly put the brakes on. So like he was still kind of being hitting on her. But I think what I'm seeing here is that, at least for me, what I took that as to mean was that Pilar is potentially actually interested in Stephen.
Okay. Yeah. And so she's changing up her MO now that she wants something different.
Right.
So Pilar has a lot of motivations here.
Yes.
And that's where we end.
That's where we end.
That's December 23rd.
So are you still stuck in Vegas?
Yeah. So the way I got through Las Vegas was we had this really nice floor to ceiling window in our hotel room. I just did a lot of yoga. I rolled out my travel yoga mat. I could see the mountains. I had that side. And I did a lot of yoga in front of the mountains. So I got into some really great self-soothing.
That's amazing. Where will Christmas Caitlin be December 24th?
Oh, I think by then, December 24th. So we actually had a really harrowing flight on December 23rd.
Oh.
Have you ever been on a flight where people scream because it's so bad?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I was texting you about that. But yeah, we were on that kind of flight, but that took us to Seattle. So next time I'll be in Seattle. How about you? Are you in Chicago the whole time?
Except for that 3 or 4 day trip to Dubai. Other than that, Chicago.
Other than that, Chicago.
Yeah, no, I am forever while we are doing Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I am sitting in a closet in a suburb of Chicago. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Good. Well, you know what? You're consistent.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, it's nice that now us, though, it's like nearly summer here.
Yeah.
Things are alive. I always get so sad when things are dead in the winter. So things are alive. That's great.
Yeah. Now Chad is amazed at the weather patterns that are happening. Because first of all, now Chad is a boring person, but
who's amazed by the weather.
But was like, we had 3 days of 80 degrees. And then we had a dust storm for the first time ever in Chicago. Excuse
me, what?
A dust storm for the first time ever in Chicago. But yeah, it's been a weird spring.
You know, people keep saying this climate change. I feel like somebody's got to look into that.
You know, be nice. Be nice.
Boy, be nice. Yeah, maybe next year. We've got time, right?
Wow, that was like a Frank Sinatra lyric. Maybe next year.
Oh man. Okay. Wow.
Well, it was great to get to hang out again with Christmas Caitlin.
And Christmas Chad. As soon as we stop recording, it's like, and we'll go back to current selves. Okay. So let's go do that.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay. First off, Chad, I discovered the name of that place with the dinosaur pastries in Las Vegas. I think it's important enough that we need to hop back on here and
absolutely. I would not have been able to sleep tonight.
I know there was a lot of suspense, and how dare I do that? But no, they had some of the best coffee I've had in a really long time too. They're called Publicus, like public and then us, and they're on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. And so if you're there, go check them out in between your self-soothing sessions of yoga. For more from Chad and Caitlin, follow Poirot Pals on Instagram at Poirot Pals and on the Substack app.
Or you can check us out on YouTube and YouTube Music as the Poirot Pals podcast.
Our website is coming soon.
Poirot Pals is a part of the Before Dark podcast network.
Check out our other shows, such as Johnny Winjow's Journals and Journeys, and much more coming soon wherever you get your podcasts.